Yeah, I just want to announce a little bit the week 4 that technically starts today. But if you're still trying to catch up with week 3, don't worry, it's not a catch up. We delay everything, so you're good, you're on time. You'll have 2 weeks basically to do week 4. And what we're going to do is start a DBT project from scratch. So by this time, you should have already the data loaded in your data warehouse. So we're going to use that data and build a DBT project and later show it in Google Data Studio. A few things, the videos are not released yet. They should be released pretty soon, today or tomorrow. We're going to add them in the README. We read in the past feedback that for some it was maybe not the best having to copy paste or use like an already project. So I tried to do the project from scratch entirely. I created an empty repository and then I started showing everything. At the end, the project looks like the one that you'll find under week 4 Taxi Rides New York. And in the README, so there are 2 README. One is the general one with all of the things with the video. And there's this one more specific to the project inside Taxi Rides New York. There's also a lot of links to the setup, and I also prepared another file with more specific details about the setup for the ones for BigQuery. If you're using Postgres, we're going to also show alternatives. So some of the videos are going to be the same. I'm going to be showing that from dbt Cloud, but you can do the same locally. And for other videos that the process is completely different, you'll have 2 versions, depending on the alternative you want to use. And I think that's all.
Mm-hmm. And the videos are already available. We just need to upload them to YouTube, right?
Yeah, there's only one video that it's going to be delayed, which is the one about the dashboard. But there's already almost 2 hours of content, and that should give you enough. Plus, that would give you enough information to start working on the homework already, which is building your own models. Yeah. Once we update that last video, then we're also going to update the homework. And that should be all.
Yeah, okay, I see that we have quite a few questions already. So let's start with that. So the first question is, how did you load the data to S3 bucket from the NY data website? I am not sure how to answer that question. Oh, actually here I have something. Yeah, this is how. I think this is a spoiler to homework solution, so I'll close it quickly. But yeah, so using Airflow, oops, that's the right one. So you can use Airflow to do that, and yeah, that's what we've been doing this whole week. Week 2 is we were using Airflow to first download the data from NY Taxi website, then packetize it and upload to Google Cloud Storage. So it wasn't S3. Maybe this question, now I see where this is coming from. So I guess, so when we go to this NY Taxi data, because we have transfer service there, right? So one of the videos was about transfer service, and there the transfer service was moving data from S3 to Google Cloud Storage. Okay, now I understand. So this data is already in S3. So if you look at the URLs, you can see, let me copy this and make it a bit larger. Okay, I don't want to open this because it has a solution to homework.
Maybe just paste it in the web browser.
Yeah,
because at the end
you see, so maybe here it's a bit larger. So you see the URL contains S3, Amazon AWS. So this is the name of the bucket. So this data is already in S3. We didn't need to do this. That was probably a long answer to what should have been short, but the data is already in S3, so we didn't need to do any of that ourselves. Okay, now let me go back here. I'm storing data which is from a database into a data warehouse. How to put it into a pipeline if data in database may change in the future?
I'm also not sure if I understand them, because you're taking it from a CSV, not really a database, right?
Yeah, I think this question is more generic, general, not related to homework.
Okay.
So if I understand correctly, so let's say you have some database that, I don't know, in e-commerce could be about orders or something like this. And then this data is constantly changing, right?
Yeah.
So for example, today the price is this, tomorrow the price is that, and it's changing, right? And the question is, how do you put this in your data warehouse if this can change? Do you know how to do this?
I don't know if it goes directly, if the question goes to a schema evolution, targeting a schema evolution, because your example was more about the same data changes, right? And in that case, you would have a primary key, and then you would have to do some kind of deduplication, because I assume you'll have original record and then modified record. And then when you're modeling the data, you'll have to do some kind of deduplication to always take the last record on a primary key, let's say order number in that case. And as for schema evolution, if that's where the question is going, then that would be a little bit more complex, because you'll have to somehow adapt your pipeline. Or if you're using ETL as a service tools like Fivetran, there was some questions about that as well. And some of those tools, they also adapt to the schema evolution.
And another thing to add to that is instead of, so let's say you have a database with some records, so it can be item ID, item name, price, and let's say the price changes. And what you capture is this change. So you capture so let's say you have a new version, so you know that some record in a database was updated, and you save to the data warehouse this change. So every time a record changes, you save it to your data warehouse, and then you have this, a bunch of rows that change. You basically capture every time something changes, you save it in a data warehouse, and then you can sort of travel back in time, right? So you can see what was the state for this record on this particular date. I'm not sure though if it's specific for data warehouse, but at least this is how we do this. So every time a record changes, we capture this change somehow, and then we can say in our SQL query, we can say that we want to see the state at this timestamp, and we will see the latest price, for example. How to implement this, I actually have no idea. Maybe Fivetran can do this. And for all the databases, let's say if you use MySQL, there is something that can send these deltas or changes or something like this. For Postgres, probably there is something similar.
Yeah, you'll implement a pipeline that it's basically logging what's going on. So even though in the original database, maybe if it's in this case, let's like an order, it will update, but that will generate this second entry that you're mentioning. So then, because you're logging, so that's how, yes, and with Fivetran, you could do it as well, of course.
Yeah, this is Fivetran is a low-code thing, right? So you just say, okay, this is my source, this is my destination, and then it does the thing, right? It just moves the data from one location to another. Is this how it works?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, you set up a connection to, let's say, the S3 bucket or whatever you want. They have several adapters, and you can set run rule scripts and then just set a destination.
Oh, cool. How does restartability and incremental loads usually made in BigQuery? I'm familiar with Redshift, where I can use a stored procedure to chain steps. I must admit that each word on itself, I understand what it means, but collectively, maybe I'm too much data scientist to answer that. So too bad Ankush is not here. Maybe he would be able to answer that. I don't know about you, Victoria.
No, I would say I also not familiar with BigQuery. I haven't worked with BigQuery outside of this project in particular. So, but I would imagine that it's the same as any data warehouse, right? Like you could just use a key and then use that to limit a loading timestamp or something like that.
maybe, I don't know, I'll just mark it as answered, but feel free to ask this in chat. And yeah, because I myself also, I'm more like a user of a data warehouse than somebody who puts data there. So question from Ilya, do you think most of us have a grip of Airflow now? The most difficult part of the camp is over?
Next week, right? It's the most difficult one. You
think DBT will be the most difficult one?
No. I mean, I'm already in DBT week. So,
okay.
Next week, week 5.
Week 5, yeah, I don't know. I think Kafka will be the most difficult one. Well, in terms of setup, it can give more problems. I don't know. So when every time I need to set up Kafka, it's nightmare. But I haven't really needed to set up Airflow locally before that. So I think it's similar. Let's see. I hope it will be easier. So the week about BigQuery should be relatively easy because it's managed. So you don't need to do any infra setup on your machine. DBT part is also relatively simple, right? Yeah, it's also simple. Yeah, let's see. Maybe at the end of the course we will have a survey and we'll see what was the most difficult one. I hope it was Airflow. So I hope Kafka and Spark will be simpler. But at least you'll have like 2 weeks break with 3 and 4. Yeah, right. This is somewhat unrelated to the lecture videos, but what would be the pros and cons of AWS and GCP? It seems like AWS is more popular. Do you know how to answer that? Yeah, I would say also because there's a different set of products. And for example, for a data warehouse, if I were to put a start tech stack from scratch, then I would definitely use Redshift, right? Because the cost is lower. But then at the end, when you need more, you probably would need to migrate to something like BigQuery or Snowflake. I think it may be for that. They have a lot of documentation. It's pretty easy to set up. It's been there for longer. And I think it's mainly around those things, the reason why it has like a broader adoption. Yeah, I do agree that, well, it seems to me as well that AWS is more popular. At least in Berlin, I think if I look at companies that use some cloud, that AWS, probably like maybe 70% of people use AWS, then 20 maybe GCP, and then remaining 10 Azure. That's roughly how I see it. Maybe I'm wrong. And now in this course, I also got to use a bit GCP, and it seems to me that UI is nicer for GCP. Like when you go to Web Console and you see this, it's a little bit nicer. But I think when it comes to tools, it's a bit more difficult. For example, in AWS, you just do pip install AWS CLI and you have it. With Google Cloud, it's a bit more difficult. So maybe that's one reason that AWS is more popular. Just it's more mature, maybe. But I think GCP is catching up because they have nice interface, and sometimes something's cheaper, and BigQuery also I think is a big advantage that maybe other clouds don't really have. Yeah. Plus AWS has been there for 10 years. I mean, I did my thesis in using AWS, and there was not such thing as GCP yet. So. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So there's a lot of people that also go with, they're familiar with what they know aside of the stability. Yeah, but I think it's in most of the services are quite similar. So for me, I'm more used to AWS. For me, many things in GCP were straightforward. Some of them weren't. Some of them were unusual, but more or less, I think many concepts can map from one to another. Okay, if it's okay to ask, I uploaded yellow taxi data supposedly. That's very reassuring. According to Airflow, but some of them didn't upload completely. Do I need to redo this? Yeah, you don't have to do this through Airflow though. Like now, if you understand how it works, if you understand how to create a DAG, how to make dependencies, yeah, as you notice, there is some overhead with Airflow, And I experienced this today, that it sometimes can just break on your computer and not work as expected, which is very annoying. So what you can do is you can just run these things locally from a script and then upload them to GCP using, I don't know, Google CLI or just the web browser, because you will need some of this data in the next week. So if you want to follow in week 3, you want to follow along the videos and then do these queries, you will need this data. And for homework, which is more important, I think, you need to have all this for hire vehicles data. There is a shortcut. You can just use transfer service, and then it's just one click, and then you have this data in your Google Cloud Storage, but you need to have an AWS account for that, which is a little bit more annoying. Yeah. So you don't need to redo this, but you need to somehow get data to be able to, do the week 3. We can figure something out in Slack, maybe, if you have troubles running this. Can we see a leaderboard just to understand if I'm right or not in my answers? If this is about week 2, then yes, after we upload the video with the solution, I will also update a leaderboard. It will probably take some time, depending on how clean the data is. If I need to do a lot of data cleaning, that it will take a lot more time. So please don't put things like that don't look like emails to the email field. And just when you fill it in, please be careful, because it takes time to clean this later. Okay, I hope I answered that. Mm-hmm. So I think Vicky already covered that. So they will be available pretty soon.
Yeah, so after homework from week 2, then I guess you'll have the time to upload it. So let's say tomorrow or something like that.
Actually, uploading them is not as difficult as stitching up, like putting together a few videos that I need for recording. So maybe the videos for DBT will be available even earlier than the homework.
So maybe worth saying one more time, all of the videos are already recorded. The only one that will be missing is the one from the dashboard. We're also going to, so right now we only have one data studio, which was already, we're going to see if we can also release like some alternative for the people working locally. Let's see if I can make that as well for this week. Do we need to clean the data for homework? No, because the homework is just count at the end. So there's no need. Also, ideally, the transformation, it will happen during this week. So the analytics engineering, right now you're focusing on loading the data. To be fair, I didn't really put that much effort in cleaning this part in the DBT, because I focused on building a project that could give you all of the things, like all of the concepts, rather the actual writing a SQL query that you are already familiar with was one of the prerequisites. So, but this is something that you could add to the DBT project, for example.
Like hitting some cleaning. And maybe this is also, we'll see how to do this in Spark, because I think in Spark all this cleaning is a little bit easier than in SQL. But also depends on what exactly, on the type of problems we want to clean. So for example, leading trailing spaces is relatively simple to handle in SQL, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's just that I did like more of a simpler query and then just focus on the macros and stuff like that. So not to expect this to be clean after week 4, but that's where I would add it.
Okay. Does the model building features in BigQuery or AWS or Azure provide sufficient capabilities as compared to building machine learning models as in Initio? I don't know, Up Initio on Jupyter. No. What is Up Initio? Do you know?
No, but I think it's just using.
I think the question is if model building features in BigQuery are good. I think they are good. I haven't done this myself. From what I understood, it's pretty basic. Ab initio is something from Latin, right?
Starting from or based on first principles.
Okay.
It sounded like because it sounds very like Spanish because it's Latin, so, but just wanted to check. And it's usually used in legal terminology.
Yeah, maybe it's coming from a lawyer who wants to become a data engineer.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, so they are pretty basic, but it's a good start. So you can try that and then switch to Jupyter Notebook for more, let's say, advanced, like when you need more flexibility. So this is what I think. I haven't really had experience doing this in BigQuery. In AWS, it's a little bit different. I am not aware of a similar method. Like in AWS, you have Athena, which is similar to BigQuery. I don't know if you can create a model in Athena. Maybe you can. But in AWS, I would use SageMaker, and SageMaker has Jupyter Notebooks. So this is, yeah, that part. Yeah, but I think if it works for you, then it's good. And then when you need more complexity, you can switch to Jupyter Notebooks. How many students stay active learners after week 1, 2, and 3? So in week 1, we had 400 submissions. In week 2, I checked today. Maybe let me check one more time. It was 200 submissions.
So fast.
Yeah. So but week 2 is quite difficult as well. So let me quickly check how many submissions we have. So it's 227 responses. Some of them are duplicates. And then for week 3, it's too early to say because it's not over yet, right? And week 2 is not over yet as well. But yeah, I don't think this number will increase too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And from what I see from the number of views of videos, there is also like a decay. So some of the videos from week 1 was watched like 500 or 5,000 times, but for week 2 it's 1,000, and week 3 I think it's like 500. So it's also like going down. I hope it's not too difficult for you. Maybe all this Docker and Airflow stuff is just too much. But I must admit that like in real life, unfortunately, this is what you also have to deal with, like setting up environment. It's very annoying. It feels like you're not learning anything because you need to focus on setting up this Airflow thing instead of working on creating Airflow DAGs. But this is a very useful skill. And my kid just came and he's telling me that they bought ice cream.
Oh, nice. Good for him.
Yes. Yeah, he felt that this is very important, so he needed to.
It is quite important. It's very cold outside, so he must be very, very.
Yeah, it was hailing today, actually.
Yeah.
You also saw this, right?
Yeah. I went for my daily walk at that exact time, unfortunately, but yeah.
It wasn't a pleasant walk, right? Had to run. Okay. Yeah, so I hope the difficulties you encounter, they're not too discouraging for you. And yeah, what doesn't kill us make us stronger, right? And this is something that is a very good skill to figure out these things that you will for sure need at work, like figuring out like why this tool doesn't work the way I want. I have to deal with this kind of stuff pretty much every day, or if not every day, but once per month for sure.
Yeah.
What do you think about this 221?
Oh, I think that's the one someone already shared in the Slack as well. I've seen it in the past. I really like it, but I don't know. I'm not a data engineer, but I think it's very complete because if you go to the website.
The website, this one?
No, not this one. No, I remember I saw it in the past. They have like a JSON, and they actually have linked to all of these resources to learn. But I wouldn't be able to talk about all of the content in here. There's some content that I'm not super familiar with, but I think it's very complete.
Yeah, and I think this is a good note here. So when you see a roadmap like that, don't feel overwhelmed, because I think like learning these things will take like, I don't know, a couple of years, right? Like
Yeah.
this is, it feels like a university curriculum here in one document. So like computer science fundamentals will take you 1 year to master, right? So
But that's the thing, they have courses. So that's why, or maybe this is not the one I did, but they have several courses. And this is also why they have like these icons. But I remember having seen that they actually had so
yeah, there are actually multiple such roadmaps.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a different one. But for example, I would go a little bit lean, or if I can say that. So maybe you don't need all the data structures immediately. You can just pick maybe the most important thing here would be basic terminal usage, and then a bit of Linux, then Git as well, then Python here, then SQL here. So maybe you pick one thing from each, then you go through the entire thing, and then you repeat. So because it's
right,
too much.
So the green things are general, the hard are personal, and the cloud are cloud-based.
Okay,
But
it's a nice roadmap, but yeah, there are too many things. I can see why it can be overwhelming. And for example, Jenkins, I don't know. I think companies still use Jenkins, right?
Yes, I haven't seen it, but I think yes, they do.
We use it for legacy, and legacy is such a thing that stays legacy for very long, and somebody needs to support it. So if you are into this kind of things, Jenkins will be useful. We use also GitLab CI/CD for this, which is not here, but I think it's very cool as well.
Yeah.
Oh, Terraform is here.
But for example, CI/CD, I would say it's good to know the concepts, but it's not something that I would focus on the very first year or something like that. Like it's good to know what it is, but it's something that you would only do once you have like a more stable project or something like that, I would say. Because even in a project, not even in the knowledge, and then you can pick it up. But yeah.
It looks very nice, like the picture, high quality, but yeah, it's, to my taste, there is too much stuff.
I'm going to look for the one I was mentioning, and then I'm going to share it if I find it. This one had like a bunch of different courses, and then it had like different, how difficult they were and things like that.
Okay, so while you're looking, let me read for the next one. Sorry if this question has been dropped before, but I failed to deliver the homework so far, hence I missed the deadline.
Yeah, that's one. Someone wrote to me, send it to me. Yeah, this is the one. Thank you.
Can you send it in chat?
Yes.
In Zoom chat, please.
In the Zoom chat, okay.
Yeah, while Victoria is doing this, it's not over for you because we only want to look at your project. So if you're behind right now, don't worry. Just take your time, and yeah, we will decide whether to give certificates or not, only based on projects, not on homework. And the website, it's awesome data engineering.
They also have a repo. Yeah, and this is actually the one I base my repo that I talk with you about for analytics engineering. I think it's like more linear, and it doesn't have that much, but it has a lot of things. What I find nice is that it defines the coverage, the depth, and also if it's free or you have to pay, so you can focus only on the free resources.
And then it just tells you not only what you need to study, but also what you need to read to pick the topic, which might be more useful.
I find this one more useful than because the other one, it's pretty nice, and of course, but it's maybe too much, as you said, and also probably are more oriented to their courses.
And you see, they suggest to cover workflow management at the very, like it's one of the last topics.
Yeah.
Which I am not sure if the right place for that. I would put it a lot earlier. Oh, we actually did that.
Yeah.
But yeah, looks like a good map. And you can even click here and then just get all the free resources. That's cool.
And only see the books or only see the courses if you want to do courses. So it's quite nice. They even have something about like the best books. There are some of the, they only have 3, but there was design in data intensive applications. And then this one, the data warehouse toolkit, which is the one that I use for like the refresher or the review of data modeling concepts.
This one, right?
And I don't know it though. 7 databases in 7 weeks.
Oh, this is like a classical book. It's pretty old, right? But
yeah, that's
because I know this Kimball name. Like there are some.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty old. Like this person has created like a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So he's quite
I mean, it's one of like the fathers of the data warehouse, along with Imam. And I think the first version was like in the 80s.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, I think I answered that. So it's not over for you. You can catch up. So week 3 should be lighter. So you can use this time to. So week 1, you can maybe fast forward, just directly do Docker Compose and then run it there. And then week 2, depending on how much time you have, maybe you can go through the solution that will be published today, and then it will give you everything you need for week 3. Or you can use transfer service. The video is already there. And while watching the video, you will probably learn a lot already, like the homework solution. Okay. So the next one, general question. Is there a similar solution like Kubernetes for deploying stateful applications, for example, databases, which will restart the stateful application? Yeah, there are solutions like Kubernetes for deploying stateful applications like ECS, for example, Amazon Elastic Container Service, which is like Kubernetes, but it's not Kubernetes. So you don't need to worry about upgrading to the latest version of Kubernetes and so on. It's less popular, maybe also less well documented compared to Kubernetes, but you can use that. So in some aspects it's easier to manage. In some aspects it's more difficult because documentation maybe is not as good. But then I'm not sure if you really want to deploy your database there. Because if there is an option to use a managed database, then maybe you should go with that. Or you can go with something simpler, like, I don't know, DynamoDB, that you don't need to manage at all. Yeah, and I think in Google there is also something similar. Yeah. I'm not sure about this part, which will restart the stateful application, what it means. Yeah.
Too much data engineering for me.
Yeah. But there is also a thing called HashiCorp Nomad, which is like Kubernetes, but cooler, like more hip, I think. Yeah, you can try that. They are all quite similar. Question from Luis, a more generic question. When and why do you think the data engineering position started? We have ETL tools long time ago, but we can say that data engineering started there. Do you know?
No, not really. But I would say probably similar with what happened with the analytics engineering, right? Like there was suddenly the whole stack became more complex, and you couldn't just do with a few scripts and a cron shop, and that's probably where it started, I would assume, but don't know the whole story of the data engineer.
Yeah, maybe I will give you a very maybe not correct answer, but from data scientist's perspective. So data science started like, I don't know, more than 10 years ago. And people maybe expected too much from data science. They thought they would just hire a bunch of people with PhD in mathematics and they would just do some magic and then the data will just be clean and models will be perfect and companies will earn a lot of money. But then they did this, things didn't work, and they thought, okay, what is the problem? And it turned out that it required a lot of engineering, like all these data pipelines need to be there. And I think this was around time when data science was getting some traction. People realized that it's also important, and then I think it was also together with analytics, like around that time, maybe in the beginning of 2010s, 10, 20,
Yeah.
somewhere there, right?
Do you want the right answer? 2011.
11, okay.
In Airbnb
11.
and Facebook, apparently they started to do it, and it's indeed related to all of the things that we were saying about with the complexity of the ETL process. Then there suddenly needed a role more oriented to just build these pipelines, transport and transform that data.
Yeah, because I imagine that a company hire an analyst and an analyst says, okay, I don't know what to do with this. Like somebody needs to come and set up this infra. And then because analysts couldn't do this, data scientists couldn't do this, somebody needed to do this. And ETL developers kind of rebranded into data engineers, I guess. Okay, nice history lesson.
Yeah. So this would, I guess, for me, what are the most important skills for a new analytics engineer to master other than SQL? So SQL is definitely super important. It will depend, as any other role, of course, in what the company is going to do. So it's going to, I personally don't really use much Python, aside of like maybe some API scripts that could be, but SQL is definitely the one I use every day and a lot. But it could be very good that if you're at least familiar with Python and then you can write with it, then data modeling concepts, because have in mind here, you have to focus a lot on transforming that data to be later used. So then it's very important that you know how to transform the data. Then some BI, like being able to expose that data later on to some BI tool. It doesn't mean that you need to focus on building dashboards or things like that, but at least know how the data could be used from the business perspective. And then I would say once you have that, then also knowing concepts around data warehousing and at least know the parts of the ETL, ELT, all of these concepts, kind of like how the data gets to the data warehouse and be able to understand that. So kind of like to cover both parts would be very important.
I also have a related question to you. Too bad Ankush is not here. Maybe he could also help. So how do you think these skills that analytics engineers need are useful for data engineers? So for example, knowing dbt, how do you think is it quite useful for data engineers, or maybe it's not their main focus?
Yeah, I would say it's not the main focus. For us, for example, at our company, data engineers, they don't really use dbt. Everyone has access in all of this, but it's something that the analytics engineer will do. And then the data engineer mainly just focus on what happens before the warehouse. So right now with Kafka, maintaining the S3 buckets, the pipelines and all of this. But I think it's still good to know what's going on, because where is your data going as a data engineer, let's say, and because then your stakeholder happens to be the analytics engineer. So I think it's a good knowledge to know what is actually happening there.
And yeah, the reason I mentioned Ankush is because 1 year ago, or maybe more, when we first met, he was working at a different company, also as a data engineer. And then he mentioned this tool, dbt, and I had no idea what this tool is. So I looked it up. And he told me that this is something they use, also data engineers in that company. So this was the first time when I heard about this. And apparently some data engineers also need to use this tool sometimes.
Yeah, if you think that many companies, they don't have analytics engineers, right? So it's quite neat. So either the data engineer has to pick it up or data analyst. And I would say it makes more sense that the data engineer picks it up. But I think companies that use DBT already are also quite familiar with the role of the analytics engineer. So it makes more sense that that would be the person that would take over of DBT.
And I think I asked you that in our podcast about analytics engineering, but some data engineers transition to analytics engineering sometimes, right?
Yeah. So the analytics engineer is a person that up to a year ago was doing something else, right? So either data engineering or data analysis. And then you just either go get a little bit more technical or go get a little bit more business focus. So yes.
Okay, Alvaro is asking for clarity. For week 3 homework, we need yellow taxi data for 2019 and 20, and for hire vehicles for 2020. So for the homework, you need for hire vehicles data only for 2020. But for the lectures, to follow along the material, Ankush uses 2019 and 20 yellow taxi data. So to be able to follow the videos along and also execute the same queries, you need yellow taxi data for these 2 years, but for the homework, it's 2020 only.
And
yes.
Yeah.
You wanted to mention green taxi data, right?
Yeah. But I don't know, do you think they'll need 2019 and 2000? As long as they have some green taxi data, the project will work. So,
and we are now talking about week 4, about analytics engineering, because we also use some green data there. And in the homework solution, I show you how to upload green data as well. This is quite a small change. So if you already know how to upload yellow taxi data, you'll just need to change a few lines of code. Basically, do like find replace yellow to green, and then that's pretty much it, because the URLs have the same pattern. Yeah, but this is for week 4.
So then by week 4, you should have, to summarize, you should have the green taxi data for 2019, yellow taxi data 2019 and 2020 that you use for the videos to follow Ankush. The high volume data for 2020 for the homework.
Not high volume. So for hire vehicles, there are 2 options. Yes. One is high volume, the other is, well, assuming low volume. So we need for hire vehicles, not high volume.
For hire vehicles, 2020 or also 2019?
19, sorry. Yes, 19.
And then you can use the same to get green taxi data for 2019 and 2020 to be able to use week 4.
Okay, can you suggest any interesting data sets to try our data pipelines? So there was a discussion, a thread in the announcement channel 1 week ago. A lot of data sets were shared there. I didn't know that there are so many cool websites with data sets, so check it out. So I think it was from
1 week ago. Look it up and then reshare it. Here, does anyone know nice and relative? Okay, copy link. I'll put it in the announcements once more.
Yeah, and what I also want to do is do a Slack dump from Data Talks Club that you can also use for playing with this data set and see what it can do. Nice. It's a bunch of JSON files, and yeah, you can build some data pipelines there as well. If my post on social networks doesn't get any reaction, does this affect my score in the end? I do care about being on the leaderboard. It doesn't affect the score. So we count links, not likes, and counting likes would be just too difficult. Like we will need to go to LinkedIn, and then, yeah, it's just too difficult. And then there are many different social networks. Yeah, so we just now count the number of posts you make, but don't overdo this. We cap it also at 7. So every day, let's say you're following a course and then every day you share your progress. So that's why it's capped at 7, so not more. You can of course share more, but yeah, we will only count 7. And
Plus,
it
if you
doesn't
tag
affect.
us, at least I try to react to everything.
Yes, yeah.
Everything I see that says data talks, and I go and react.
Yeah, I also comment, and then it usually gets like the widens the reach. So, but yeah, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Oh, nice question. So, do you need to speak German? So, do you?
I think you don't need to. I mean, I've been 3 years in Berlin. I do speak German, but not for work. It will depend. I mean, most of startups, if you go for a startup, of course, more startups, you're going to be safe. Just try to make sure to ask that before and all of that. It can happen to you that, of course, you end up in a team with like a lot of Germans, in my experience, and then you will feel like you need to speak German to integrate. And that's the thing I would recommend, though. And this is outside of the learning part, that if you live in Germany, then try to learn German so you can actually integrate. I feel like, at least in my case, it has helped me a lot to feel more in the country and like be able to go to a doctor and like or receive calls and stuff like that and speak at least a bit of German. I don't speak super fluid. It has been quite helpful, but not to work.
Yeah. So like maybe it's also helpful to separate Berlin and the rest of Germany here, because in Berlin it's very international, and yeah, in many companies, if you go there and start speaking German with people there, they will just look at you and say, sorry, I don't understand you. While if you do this in Munich or any other German city, they will talk to you back in German. Yeah, my German is quite bad, so I spent too much. Like here, I lived like 5.5 years or 6, or maybe 7 years. I lost count, but it's just too long to now. I start feeling ashamed that I don't speak German still. But yeah,
but
Berlin is.
I mean, in Berlin, you even go in Miete to coffee shops. Like, everything I said before is just disclaimer, Berlin based. But it's true that you sometimes go to even coffee shops and they reply to you in English because the person doesn't know German, doesn't speak German, which is quite crazy for a German capital. So yeah.
Yeah, and most of the couriers who deliver things, they also don't speak German. True. So they just I can hear that from the way they speak, that they don't speak German, and that's good for me because I don't speak it either. So then we just switch to English.
Yeah, and it's true that you can get everything in English. And there was also like one small part. Do you need a visa and all of that? Yes.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it would depend on. I have Italian citizenship. I don't, so then I don't need, for example, a visa. But then every other country, I would say yes, if it's no European.
Yeah, so you don't need German for a visa. So if you already have a working contract, then you just use this contract, and that's enough to get a blue card visa. But this is blue card, like a special program. But if you want to get a job seeker visa, then I think you need to show some level of proficiency of German. But I don't remember, is it A2 or B1? Not very, like you don't need to spend a lot of time.
For job seeker as well, for something like data engineer, because I think for IT is less the requirements.
I think so. Maybe not anymore. 5 years ago, I think it was a requirement to get at least A1 level to have like a basic.
I think not anymore, because I know a lot of people that had it, the job seeker one, and they definitely don't speak German.
Okay, then ignore what I said and look it up.
Yeah, definitely look it up. It also will depend on your country, and if you have like some kind of degree or something like that, then it would also may change things, right?
Yeah, right. So for this one, for blue card, you need to have a degree. Without a degree, you cannot get into this program.
Yeah.
So then you'll, yeah, I don't know, check internet. So do you see data engineering being outsourced like coding, for example? I tend to see people sourced out of Russia, Ukraine, and Poland, and data engineering also affected by similar moves in 2022.
Yes.
Yes.
Don't you? I received a bunch of LinkedIn message of people offering me to outsource engineers. I don't know where
Yeah,
from, but
but they approach you, but it doesn't mean that companies actually agree.
yeah, I don't know who agrees. I've never agreed so far, and never even talked to them. But there must be, right? Someone. If a company, if an agency is providing that service.
Because I think when it comes to data, it's a little bit trickier than with basic coding, right? Because data can be sensitive, then you need to have all the right, first of all, you need to have a lawyer that would put a proper data regulation contract. Then you also need to have an infrastructure that allows you to maybe not send sensitive data to these outsourcing partners. So I think it becomes a bit trickier than with, let's say, traditional software engineering. But on the other hand, with traditional software engineering, you also get to see things like, I don't know, phone numbers, emails. So yeah, maybe we will see something like this. But I see that, for example, data science is often kept in-house rather than outsourced. So probably something similar is still happening with data engineering. Yeah, I don't know. So maybe we will see this in 1 year if it changes. But I do also, people reach out to me saying, we have this great team in Minsk, Belarus. We want to start working on your projects. And then I have to answer them saying, sorry, we don't need your services right now.
Yeah. Same.
Do you think it's necessary to have some basic knowledge in Kubernetes in data engineering? I think it's helpful. It's not necessary, but it is helpful because what happens is we have these DAGs that we run in Airflow, and then in DAGs you have tasks, and these tasks are often Kubernetes jobs or something like that. So you have some infra. In many companies, this infrastructure is managed by Kubernetes because it's quite simple to, get a new container there, execute a new job in Kubernetes. So I don't think it's necessary, but I think it's helpful. And then again, I'm not a data engineer, I'm a data scientist. But for me as a data scientist, knowledge of Kubernetes was quite helpful because I could debug all the jobs that I'm running on Airflow with that run on Kubernetes. And then I could see logs and do all that. So I would say, yeah, if you want to learn it, it will not hurt. If you think you can get hired without Kubernetes knowledge. Like with the materials, for example, here that we have in this course, it should be sufficient to get hired, and then you can pick Kubernetes at work, for example. I think.
Yeah.
You agree?
Yeah. I think Kubernetes is getting more and more popular, so it can't hurt to know what it is at least.
Yeah, it is planned to write some articles, Medium, related to the Zoomcamp. Articles from teachers and students. We don't have it in our curriculum, so we only have a project at the end. So if I go here,
but people can write Medium articles.
Of course, yeah, because maybe the question comes from, because in the other course in Machine Learning Zoomcamp, we had article as one of the activities. But then at the end of, I think people at the end of the course felt a bit tired to do this. So yeah, and there were also 3 projects, not just one in that one. So think by the time you finish this, you'll be pretty exhausted and you will not want to write articles. But if you do want to write, please write. Yeah. Okay. Now I want to go back. Oops. Because I have this Zoom thing at the top that I don't see the tabs.
Oh yeah, I also have that with Zoom.
Yeah. So you can write that, of course, but not maybe as a. We can think about this. So if many of you want to do this, let us know. And we can think if we should incorporate this into the syllabus or not. Is homework 3 going to require students to submit a public code URL or not? Yeah, I think right now when we created this form, we forgot to include this field. So I found where the form is located. So now I also have edit permissions to this form. I will just go there and add this URL. So when I do this, I will make an announcement and please resubmit your work. But if for some reasons you already submitted this and you do not have a chance to resubmit it, maybe we'll have to tweak the grading script a little bit that will accept like those who already submitted without the URL. Okay, but yeah, it will change and it will have a URL there. Can Jenkins or GitLab be used instead of Airflow?
No.
To some extent you can in Jenkins. I think they are more like general purpose CI/CD tools. Well, CI more. So you don't you don't use them for data workflows. You can in principle, but yeah, because things like Airflow and other workflow engines, they are tailored to this specific use case, right? So
Yeah.
you have all these nice things there.
So they fit a different use case, definitely. For me, they overlap, but they fit different use cases.
Yeah, I must admit that we do use Jenkins for that at my work, but don't do that. Please don't do that. You will regret.
And you also said before that it was legacy, so.
Yeah, it is still legacy, and it's just we need to maintain it. Nobody wants to touch it because you don't know what happens, and nobody wants to spend time moving it elsewhere. So it just kind of runs there, and yeah. So yeah, I personally wouldn't come anywhere close to Jenkins, but yeah, if you like Jenkins, why not? So are data engineering skills needed for the machine learning engineer? Yeah, I think they're helpful. Not all of them, but for example, machine learning engineering also often requires building some data pipelines for the model. Sometimes it's done by data engineers, sometimes it's done by data scientists, sometimes it's done by, so basically everyone can take part there. And I think, let's say if a company, a team doesn't have a data engineer, a dedicated data engineer, yes, somebody needs to do this, a machine learning engineer or data scientist, and then knowing tools like Airflow, Spark, maybe dbt is quite helpful to prepare the data in the form that is useful for machine learning models.
What would be the next biggest step for dbt in your opinion in terms of development? Like around the tool specifically? So like where is dbt going, or how do you read this question?
Yeah, I think it's about tool, not the company, right?
Yep. So like what would be in their roadmap or something like that? What would I expect to see for them or us in the project? I feel it's like
probably
a very
for them. I don't know. Probably for them, like where the tool is going, what is next for the tool.
That's very interesting. So dbt, you're going to know this in one of the first videos, but they have two parts. Basically, one is the dbt core, and that part is open source. And that's the part that does the whole magic. And then they have dbt cloud, and I think their next steps are going to go around developing dbt cloud, because that's where they do the money. And the thing with being dbt core open source is that they literally build they provide their information to the competition, so then try to make dbt cloud stronger to compete better, I would say that. And then more specifically in things for the tool, great. And then more specifically, things that they recently introduced and I would really like to see is more around data cataloging or data governance. So they recently introduced something called metrics, and you could actually put those, define something like, I don't know, utilization rate or net revenue or stuff like that, how that is calculated and where that comes from. And that's like a big problem in companies. It's very, very common that everyone has like their own spreadsheet. And then they're like, no, if I make a calculation, the revenue is this, and numbers change. So treating more data as a product in general, I would say that would be a next step as well. I hope that clears. Given that said, this is my opinion.
I'm just reading comments that Chris was saying that she's been learning German for fun since 2020.
I was going to answer to that one as well. Like, how is it going?
Careful, Alexei, coders must be listening. That's probably to the discussion about outsourcing to outsourcing data engineering, because indeed I probably was assuming too much about the distinction between data engineers and software engineers. Software engineers also, I remember that when I was in Poland, I worked at a bank, and it was actually an offshore, like outsourcing sort of team. And we didn't see personal data. We had some sort of mask data, but still we needed to do with all this sensitive, well, we needed to write code that would deal with all this sensitive data. So in this, like this aspect, I think there are ways around, like there are ways to ensure that data is not leaked. Maybe we just need to wait a bit when till this area gets more mature, and then we will see more data engineer outsourced somewhere.
I also seen that in a company. They came from Ukraine. They were in Ukraine, and they used to come to the office like once a year or something like that, and they have complete access, but they had to sign something.
And they also needed to come to your to the office, right?
Yeah, like once a year for a week, I guess, to kind of like have meetings and
see. Okay, I see that we're
past time.
Yeah, past time. Okay, thanks everyone for questions. We actually this was the first time when we managed to answer all your questions, even though it was just two of us. Maybe that's why we managed to answer all of the questions.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, maybe we will not answer that, because you can ask maybe this in Slack, because we...
Would you say DBT is the next big thing in data stack? Yes.
Okay, I will stop sharing now, so nobody asks more questions. Okay, thanks Victoria, thanks everyone, and the homework will be released soon. The videos for DBT, I will start uploading them very soon, and have fun.